welcome to this Yin Yoga session. Make yourself comfortable, just perhaps make sure that you've got a firm cushion or bolster to hand, maybe a couple of blocks if you have some. If you don't, then don't worry, we'll be able to find different ways of coming into the shapes that don't require props, hopefully. But it's always useful to have them close by, just in case we need that a little bit of extra support, or in some cases they can help to intensify the sensations that we're looking for in each shape. And then once you're ready, we'll find a way to a comfortable seat, so that could be cross-legged for you, maybe propped up on blocks or on that firm cushion. Allowing the shoulders to soften down away from the ears. And finding a little length through the back of the neck, maybe a tiny tuck of the chin. If you're comfortable, closing down through the eyes and softly veiling the eyelids. And whether the eyes are closed or open, inviting the gaze down the bridge of the nose or down towards the ground. Just noticing how the body feels. Noticing if the mind is darting all over the place, or if you've been able to sink straight into this moment. And you might take a couple of physiological sighs. The physiological sigh is a double inhalation and then a slow exhalation. And it's a way to help the nervous system shift towards the parasympathetic branch, so that kind of rest and digest branch. So you might fill up on an inhalation through the nose, pause at the top and then sip in a little bit more air, and then release. And take 2 more of those if it feels good, inhaling fully. Pausing, a little sip in of extra air, and releasing. And one last one, inhaling deeply. Pausing, sipping in a little bit more air, and release. Few moments, just allowing the breath to settle once more in and out through the nose if possible. And with each inhalation, you might just find a tiny bit of extra length through the spine, almost as if the crown of the head's being drawn up towards the ceiling on a string. And on each exhalation, noticing where you can invite in a little more softness in the body, perhaps the shoulders drop down away from the ears. Perhaps you relax the muscles around the eyes and the jaw. And as you breathe in and out through the nose, just allowing the belly to be soft. Inviting the breath right down into the base of the lungs, and as you do so, noticing if the abdomen just begins to expand on the inhalations and soften on the exhalations. And come through just 2 more rounds of breath. To maintain this easeful and steady breath over the next little while as we come through the different shapes. And you can use the breath as a kind of metronome for the practice, so perhaps noticing as we come into different shapes, if you start to find the breath becoming a little bit more ragged, it can be an indication that perhaps you've come in a little bit too far and you need to ease back a little bit. So just using that breath to return to. And we're going going to start to make our way over into a tabletop position. Finding hands underneath the shoulders and knees underneath the hips. Perhaps taking the knees just a little bit wider than hip distance. It can help with finding that little bit of extra stability. And we're going to make our way into a thread the needle pose for the right shoulder initially. So if you have bolster to hand, you could use this widthways across the mat and take the right arm down onto that bolster if it's too much to come all the way down to the ground. But have a play around, see what works for you. And you might start just by reaching the right hand right up into the sky, peeling the right shoulder open. And then as you exhale, start to thread the right arm underneath the left arm. And the right shoulder comes down towards the ground, right fingertips stretching away from you, the right temple down towards the mat. Finding a little bit of a stretch through the outside of that right shoulder. And you might walk the left hand towards the top left corner of the mat. In each of the shapes that we come through, looking for what's known in Yin as your edge of sensation. So it's this place where we know that we wouldn't want to go any further because it might actually tip over into, rather than just being a little bit of mild discomfort, something actually acutely painful. Once you find that edge, just easing back slightly, finding somewhere that you think you might be able to hold for 3 or maybe 4 minutes. And once you've found that edge, we move towards stillness. Again, you could keep the eyes closed if that feels comfortable. And then we'll stay for time and invite the attention into the body. Noticing which sensation, which area of the body is sending the most signals, and just observing how that might change as we stay here. There's maybe about another 6 or 7 rounds of breath to go, nice and easy on both inhalation and exhalation. If with any of the shapes that we come through in this session you feel like you need to exit a little bit earlier than cueing, or maybe stay a little bit longer, then remembering that this is your practice, you can absolutely give yourself permission to do so. Maybe just one more round of breath to go, and when you're ready we'll just start to walk the left hand back underneath the left shoulder. Start to press down through the palm, and you might reach that right hand up to the sky as you uncurl, noticing how the shoulder feels, and release it back down to the ground. And by way of rebound, if it's comfortable to come into a child's pose, perhaps taking the knees even wider, sending sit bones towards the heels. If you have that bolster to hand, you could thread that between the legs and come down to rest. chest on the bolster. And noticing what's a comfortable place to rest. For the arms, it could be with the hands down past the ankles, allowing the shoulders to curl forwards. And we'll just be here for a few moments, sensing into the differences, if any, between the two shoulders. And taking just a couple more rounds of breath here. And then as you're ready, we'll start to make our way back towards a tabletop position. Again, perhaps the knees just a tiny bit wider than hip distance. And this time we're going to target that left shoulder. So as you find your next inhalation, reaching the left hand up to the sky, finding a little twist through the spine as you peel that left shoulder open. And then threading left hand through, left shoulder to the mat, left temple to the ground. And again, walking the right hand towards the top right hand corner of the mat, if that feels comfortable. Noticing how it feels on this side. Maybe it's a little bit tighter, or perhaps you need to angle the arm slightly differently to find that same stretch, that same sensation through the back of the left shoulder and into the deltoid. Noticing if you've begun to grip in the jaw or tense up through the muscles around the eyes. Can you invite in a little more softness on the exhalation? As we drift over the halfway point in the second side, just noticing if the mind has drifted. Inviting it back into the body. Noticing how the breath is. There's something like another 4 or 5 rounds of breath to go here. And then, as you're ready, beginning to walk that right hand back underneath the right shoulder, and then peeling left hand up towards the sky, maybe on an inhalation. And releasing it back down to the ground. You could just take a moment in tabletop if you like, feeling into the two sides, so they've balanced out perhaps. And then again, you might find your rebound in child's pose, perhaps once more with that cushion or bolster underneath the chest. And taking just a couple more rounds of breath here. Sensing particularly into that left shoulder as the tissues begin to rebound after the stretch. And for our next pair of shapes, we're going to start to travel down the body a little bit more into the hips, and particularly targeting the hip flexor. The first time, or the first side, will be targeting the left leg. So we're going to come into a version of dragon pose, and if there's a particular version of dragon that you know you love and want to take, then feel free to find that. I'm going to invite us into a winged dragon, where we're going to take the right foot forward, so maybe stepping it to just outside the right hand as we enter from a tabletop position. And you might start to walk the left leg back a little bit, so until you find your edge of sensation for the left hip. You might allow the pelvis to sink a little bit, maybe walking the left knee back a little more, just having a play around to see what works for you. And you might notice quite a lot of sensation in the right hip as well, as we find that compression of the thigh coming up towards the rib cage. So this could be where you want to stay. If you'd like to add in a little bit more of a stretch for the outside of the right hip, then taking the right toes and angling them out to the side a bit, maybe shuffling the foot a little bit wider, and coming over onto the blade of the right foot, so the knee starts to drop out towards the side. Again, you could stay here, or maybe you take the right hand to the inside of the right knee and just rest it there, perhaps encouraging in a little bit more depth in the shape. So you start to find perhaps a stretch through the adductors on the inside of that right leg, as well as that target area at the front of the left hip. And again, that might be enough for you. If it's accessible and feels good, you could drop down to forearms, perhaps using the blocks underneath the forearms or that flat cushion. Eventually finding stillness wherever you land. Again, inviting awareness into the body, into the sensations as they morph. We're just coming up over the halfway point for this first side. You might notice, again, if you're gripping anywhere that tension is not required to stay in the shape. And if you find an area as you scan through the body, perhaps just inviting in that sense of softness, of letting go with an exhalation. And there are perhaps just another 3 or 4 or so rounds of breath. Again, nice and easy with the exhalations. And then when you're ready to come out, this can be quite an intense shape, so make sure you move gingerly, slowly, gently. And coming back up onto the hands, allowing that right knee to stack once more over the right ankle. Perhaps just walking the hands back in a little bit so you can gradually ease out of the stretch from the back leg. And before we find our rebound, it might feel really nice just to lengthen out that front right leg, finding a little bit of a gentle stretch for the back of the right leg through the hamstring. Just for a breath or two. And then, again, taking care, stepping the right foot back to join the left. It can feel really nice, I think, in a rebound to come all the way down to the belly for this pose or for this resonance. Stacking the hands underneath the forehead or the side of the head. Allowing the heels to drop out to the sides and maybe just a little shuffle of the pelvis in towards the ground. If another of those physiological sighs feels good, perhaps that double inhalation and exhalation. Inviting one of those into the body as you monitor the front of that left hip and the inner groin and right hip. And if you've had your head turned to one side, you might just shift it towards the other. And spending as long as you need in your rebound for the sensations to subside. And when you're ready to do so, we'll start to make our way back up onto all fours, getting ready to come into that same shape on the other side. So this time we'll be targeting the front of the left hip. And stepping the left foot forward towards the outside of that left hand. Again, taking the time to set up, so noticing how far back you want that right knee to travel. And again, this side may feel slightly different, perhaps this is enough. Or if you're coming into the winged version, then angling those left toes out towards the top left corner of the mat slightly. And rolling over onto the outside blade of that left foot. Maybe the left hand comes inside the left knee. You could stay like this. And once more, it might be a case of dropping down onto elbows, if that's available. Using props to bring the ground up towards you if you would like that sensation but can't quite reach down to the ground. And gradually softening into the shape. You can take this first minute or so of each pose that we come through for the mind to trust that we know what we're doing and that we're not in danger, and for it to allow the muscles to begin to relax a little bit more, stop guarding. I'm just coming up over the minute mark now, so maybe you'll notice a little softening of gripping or any tension. Once more, we're just drifting over that halfway point. You may have already noticed how sometimes in these shapes, as we stay for time, the sensations can either intensify the longer we stay and we need to ease out a little bit. Well, sometimes they begin to diminish and we actually need to find a slightly deeper expression of the shape. Sometimes we can stay exactly as we are. And there's something like another 4 or 5 rounds of breath to go. And then again, just as with the first side, making sure you move carefully and slowly as we begin to exit the shape, coming back up onto the hands if you've been down on forearms. Allowing that left sole of the foot to roll back to the ground as the left knee stacks back over the left ankle. And making any adjustments with the back leg to gradually send the hips backwards in space, lengthening through that left leg, finding a little bit of a stretch, not too deep, into the back of the leg, into the hamstring. And then we'll make our way down onto our rebound pose. Again, you could find Makrasana, so the elbows out to the sides, hands stacked under the forehead. And once more, inviting your awareness into that middle region of the body, all through the hips, through the groin, the very top of the hamstrings at the back into the glutes. You're not looking for anything in particular, just observing, noticing if there is anything there to be noticed. Again, if you've had your head turned to one side, perhaps just shifting gaze to the opposite elbow. And then over the next few moments, we'll begin to make our way back up towards upright seat. So swinging the legs out in front of us. Taking your time to get there as always, just being conscious that though it might not feel like much at the time, we've put some of our muscles and connective tissues through quite a workout. And the next couple of shapes we're going to come through, we're going to start to target the back of the legs and find some quite deep, wherever that looks like in our body, flexion of the spine. So coming all the way up through the lumbar, thoracic and cervical spine, targeting the thoracolumbar fascia, so this big diamond of fascia that sits in the mid to low back and can often get very tight and contribute to low back pain, so as it becomes stickier and stickier. And hopefully as we find the next couple of shapes, we'll begin to stretch that out a little bit. So there's a couple of different options again. I'm going to find a half butterfly forward fold. Now if you're perfectly comfortable sitting straight down on the floor, left leg out in front, taking the sole of the right foot into the right thigh, allowing that right knee to drop down towards the ground. If this already feels like this is going to be your maximum range and there's no forward fold here, you might like to prop yourself up on either a cushion or a block. And as you do so, just being mindful of hyperextending that left knee. So if it starts feeling like the back of the left knee is really pushing down towards the ground and it's uncomfortable, you might even take a second block underneath there. If it feels okay without anything, then just paying attention as we come through and begin to fold into the shape. So starting to walk the hands forwards, allowing the chest to come down as far as it comes. It doesn't matter if it comes all the way down to the leg or not. Allowing a relaxation through the back of the neck, the head to be heavy and almost contributing to the flexion of the spine. Using the weight of the head to kind of deepen us into the fold. Rather than using the hands to drag us down into the shape and tensing up through the upper shoulders and back, seeing if you can just allow them to rest onto the ground. Or perhaps on the leg or wherever they have landed. Again, noticing if there's any gripping of muscles either in the legs, upper body or through the face. And coming back to the breath. With each exhalation, inviting in that sense of softness. And that's about the halfway point here. You might notice with each exhalation a tiny bit more of a surrender into the shape. And something like another 7 or so rounds of breath here. And then when you're ready to begin to exit from the shape, just walking the hands back in towards the pelvis, straightening up through the torso. And for rebound this time, perhaps just lengthening the right leg out in front of us and shuffling the hips more towards the centre of the mat or whatever we're on. Coming all the way down onto the back and taking the feet a little bit wider than hip distance and just allowing the knees to rest against one another. Should help to feel kind of spacious through the low spine. And find a comfortable place for the hands to rest. Again, if it's comfortable, closing down through the eyes, doing so, and sending the attention from the back of the left leg, where you might start to feel a kind of easing, and into that lumbar area of the spine. Noticing if the tissues there on their journey back to their usual shape, bring in any sense of tingling or any other sensations that are there to be felt. And we'll take just a couple more rounds of breath here. And then you might find a really gentle windscreen wipe of the knees side to side, just dropping them both towards the right, and coming back through center, and both towards the left. And then back through center. And we'll start to make our way back up to that seated position, this time sending the right leg out long and finding that same setup on this side, so the left sole of the foot in towards the inside of the right thigh. If you want to come up onto a block, then just tucking that underneath the sit bones. And finding a nice upright spine to begin with, and then slowly walking the hands forwards, folding forwards, chest down towards the thighs, relaxation of the neck so the head can hang heavy, letting go of any of the tension in the right leg. Noticing if the adductors in the left leg have seized up and are kind of lifting that left knee away from the ground. Can you soften there? Now the left knee to drop down towards the mat. Again, we're just drifting over that halfway point here. Allowing the exhalation to help you soften all throughout the body. There's somewhere around another 6 or 7 breaths to go. Once more, whenever you are ready to do so, starting to gently walk the hands back in towards the pelvis, coming upright through the spine. And we'll send that left leg long as we come down onto our backs. And again, you could either have the soles of the feet to the ground and knees point to the sky. You might like to keep both legs extended, allow the toes to knock out towards the sides. And inviting the attention down from the top of the spine, from the neck. Travelling down between the shoulder blades, through the mid-back and into the low back, and resting there for a moment. Perhaps there's a sensation to be felt here. It could be a feeling of warmth in the tissues. Maybe a slight ache. Or maybe nothing. And taking just a couple more rounds of breath. And the final place we'll be coming is to our final resting pose of Shavasana. If your body is craving a final movement or a final shape, then perhaps coming through that now. It could be as simple as drawing the knees into the chest and giving them a gentle squeeze, maybe massaging that low back area into the ground by taking the knees side to side, or finding a little circle. And then whenever you're ready to do so, once more extending the legs out long, finding a way down to our Shavasana. The hands could be a little bit wider than hip distance, so coming out from the side of the body, palms rolling open towards the sky. And similarly with the legs, taking the heels a little bit wider, allow the toes to drop out to the sides. And as you arrive and allow the shoulders to roll back down into the ground, it might feel good just to take a tiny lift of the head, a little tuck of the chin to extend through the back of the neck, and then place the back of the head back down onto the ground. And after that last bit of effort, just softening everything down into the mat. Feeling the support beneath you. if you have the space, the time to stay for a little longer in Shavasana, I encourage you to do so. Otherwise, you might make your way slowly back up to a seated position. As you arrive, maybe allowing a slight humbling of the head towards the heart and a drawing together of hands at heart center and Anjali Mudra. Becoming aware of the contact of one palm receiving the other. And in gratitude for our practice and in recognition of the sameness in each of us, I bow to you and say Namaste.